Hello, dear listeners, to the English Globe, a podcast where we explore important events in the world while helping you improve your English. We are so happy to have you with us today. Whether you are at home, at work, on the bus, or relaxing after a long day, we thank you for choosing to spend this time with us. Every episode is designed to give you both knowledge and language skills. Today's episode will be one of the most interesting and educational journeys we have shared together.
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. In this episode, we will talk about something very important in today's international news. Our topic is the Qatar Summit Explained, Islamic Unity on Israel. This is not just a news story. It is also a chance for us to understand how countries come together, why they meet in special summits, and how these events affect the world. And of course, while we discuss these things, we will explain new words, phrases, and ideas in clear and simple English so that you can learn step by step.
Before we begin, we kindly ask you, dear listeners, to support the English Globe. Please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel, because it helps us to reach more learners like you. We also love to hear from you. Please tell us in the comments where you are listening from, and share your opinions about today's topic. Do you find international relations interesting? Do you think summits like this one can really change the future? Your voice is important, and your thoughts can make this community stronger.
That's right, Adam. Our podcast is not just about us talking. It is about building a learning community where students from around the world can share their ideas and practice English together. When you comment, you practice your writing. When you listen, you practice your listening. And when you repeat words and phrases, you improve your speaking. So this is more than just a lesson. It is a space where learning and discussion go hand in hand.
Now let us look at why today's topic is important. Recently, world leaders and representatives from many Islamic countries gathered in Qatar. They came together to discuss their shared views and strategies on the situation with Israel and Palestine. For many years, this has been one of the most difficult and emotional topics in international politics. Summits like this show us how countries communicate, how they present their opinions, and how they try to find common ground.
And this is exactly why it matters for English learners. When we read or listen to the news, sometimes the words are difficult and the ideas feel too big. But when we break them down, we see that they are about people, about leaders, about decisions, and about hopes for peace. By learning the vocabulary of diplomacy, unity, and cooperation, you not only improve your English, but you also gain the ability to follow global events with confidence. This makes you more informed and more connected to the world.
For example, words like summit, diplomacy, unity, and mediation may sound complex, but we will explain them in detail during this podcast. By the end of this episode, you will not only understand the meaning of these words, but you will also be able to use them in sentences. This is very useful, especially for students who want to pass exams like IELTS, TOEFL, or who simply want to speak English more fluently.
Another reason this topic is so important is because it shows how countries express their solidarity. Solidarity means standing together and supporting one another. At the Qatar Summit, many countries wanted to show that they share the same feelings about the conflict and that they want to work together. Understanding this gives us a deeper picture of how the international community works. For English learners, this is a chance to learn how abstract ideas are expressed in simple, powerful words.
Also, learning about these events helps you to think critically. When you hear about a summit, you may ask, why are they meeting? What do they want to achieve? Will their decisions change anything? By practicing these questions in English, you train your brain to analyze information and express your own opinions clearly. This is an important skill not just for language learning, but for life.
So in today's journey, we will guide you step by step. First, we will understand what a summit is and why it is held. Then, we will look at why Qatar hosted this particular meeting. After that, we will talk about the key issues discussed and the messages that came out of the summit. We will also look at how other countries reacted, what challenges exist within the Islamic world, and what lessons we can take as learners of English. Finally, we will conclude with some reflections about the future.
As you listen, remember to relax and enjoy the process. Do not worry if you do not understand every single word the first time. Language learning is like climbing a mountain. You take one step at a time, and slowly you reach the top. Our job here is to make the climb easier by explaining words, repeating important phrases, and giving examples. By the end of this episode, you will not only understand the Qatar Summit better, but you will also feel more confident in your English learning journey.
And with that, dear listeners, we are ready to begin this exciting discussion. Stay with us as we explore how Islamic unity was expressed at the Qatar Summit and what it means for the wider world. This is a story of politics, history, and human hope. But most of all, it is an opportunity to grow your English in a real and meaningful context. So let us begin.
To understand why this important summit was hosted in Qatar, we first need to think about the role Qatar plays in the world. Qatar is a small country on the Arabian Gulf, but even though it is small in size, it has a very large influence in international diplomacy. Diplomacy means the art of managing relationships between countries through peaceful discussion and negotiation. Over the years, Qatar has built a reputation for being a place where leaders can meet, talk, and try to find solutions.
That is true, Adam. Qatar has hosted many international events, from sporting tournaments like the FIFA World Cup to political discussions on global challenges. Hosting a summit gives Qatar the chance to act as a neutral ground. Neutral ground means a place where different sides feel safe to speak and share their opinions. This is very important when the topic is sensitive, such as the conflict involving Israel and Palestine. Countries may not trust each other, but they may trust Qatar as a host that gives everyone space to speak.
Another reason Qatar was chosen is because it has invested a lot in building strong relationships with many countries. It has ties with Western nations, with Islamic nations, and with organizations like the United Nations. By keeping these relationships open, Qatar is able to bring different sides together. This is why many experts say Qatar plays the role of a mediator. A mediator is someone who helps two or more sides talk and maybe find common solutions without fighting.
That is an excellent word for our listeners to learn today. Mediator. For example, imagine two classmates having a disagreement. They cannot solve it by themselves, so they ask a teacher to help. The teacher listens to both sides and tries to find a fair way to solve the problem. In the same way, a country like Qatar can act as the teacher between other countries that are in conflict. It does not mean Qatar has the final decision, but it helps open the door for discussion.
And hosting a summit is also a way for Qatar to show its identity on the world stage. Even though it is small, Qatar wants to be recognized as a responsible and influential player in international affairs. Hosting leaders, giving them a safe place to speak, and managing the event carefully all show that Qatar has the ability to guide conversations at the highest level. This builds respect for the country and increases its soft power.
Soft power is another important phrase for our learners. It means the ability of a country to influence others not by force, but by attraction, respect, and cultural or diplomatic influence. For example, a country may not have a big army, but it can still shape global discussions by hosting summits, supporting humanitarian aid, or investing in education and sports. Qatar uses soft power very effectively, and the Qatar Summit is an example of this.
Let us also talk about the geography of Qatar. Being in the Gulf region makes it close to many Islamic countries that attended the summit. This makes it easier for leaders to travel there and gather in one place. The country has modern facilities, secure meeting places, and strong infrastructure. These things may sound simple, but they are very important when world leaders are meeting. A summit must be safe, organized, and comfortable for discussions to succeed.
Exactly, Adam. Another point is that Qatar has experience in balancing complex relationships. For example, Qatar has hosted talks about conflicts in Afghanistan, Sudan, and Lebanon. In these cases, Qatar invited groups that did not easily meet anywhere else. This gave it a reputation for being able to handle sensitive discussions. So when the time came for Islamic nations to gather about Israel and Palestine, Qatar was a natural choice.
For English learners, this also gives us useful vocabulary such as negotiation. Negotiation means the process of discussing something to reach an agreement. For example, if you and your friend want to watch different movies, you might negotiate. Maybe you watch your friend's choice today and your choice tomorrow. On a bigger level, countries negotiate to decide how to act in conflicts or how to cooperate in trade. Qatar provides the table where these negotiations can take place.
Another useful word here is summit. A summit is not only the highest point of a mountain. In international relations, a summit means a high-level meeting between leaders. The Qatar Summit was exactly that. Leaders and representatives coming together to talk about one of the world's most difficult issues. When you hear the word summit in the news, you should think of leaders sitting around a table, discussing serious topics and trying to find agreements.
Now let us connect this to why the summit matters to Islamic countries in particular. Qatar is seen as a bridge among them. Not every Islamic country has the same opinion about Israel or the same level of involvement in the conflict, but they all agree that it is important to discuss the matter together. By choosing Qatar, they chose a place that does not belong to one side or the other, but is respected by many. This shows how trust is a very important part of diplomacy.
Trust is another simple but powerful word. Trust means believing that someone is honest, fair, or reliable. Without trust, it is very difficult to have dialogue. Qatar's ability to gain the trust of different countries is the reason why it was able to host such an important summit. For our listeners, understanding this idea is useful not only for English, but also for life. When you build trust with people, you can communicate better and solve problems more easily.
Hosting the summit also gave Qatar the chance to play a role in shaping the conversation. The host country does not decide the outcomes, but it sets the tone of the meeting. By welcoming everyone, arranging the sessions, and highlighting humanitarian issues, Qatar was able to show that it wants dialogue to lead to peace, and not more division. This role of shaping the atmosphere is another example of diplomacy in action.
So when we ask, why was the Qatar Summit held in Qatar? The answer is clear. Qatar was trusted, experienced, geographically well-placed, and eager to use its soft power to contribute to international peace discussions. For English learners, this is a lesson about vocabulary, about international politics, and about how small actions, like hosting a meeting, can have a large impact on world affairs.
And as we move forward in our discussion, we will see how the countries that gathered in Qatar used this opportunity to show solidarity, express their views, and try to send a message of unity to the world. But before we explore that, it is important to remember the role Qatar played in bringing everyone together. Without a trusted host, such a summit might not even take place. That is why Qatar was the center stage for this event.
And for you, our dear listeners, the key takeaway here is that diplomacy is not always about size or power. Sometimes, a small country with the right reputation and the right approach can bring people together in ways that larger countries cannot. Qatar's example shows us that influence comes not only from strength, but also from wisdom, respect, and the ability to listen. That is why this summit was hosted in Qatar, and that is why the world paid attention.
Now that we understand why Qatar hosted the summit, let us look at the role of the Islamic countries that attended. This summit was not about one country alone. It was about many nations coming together to discuss a problem that touches all of them. The Israel-Palestine conflict has been a central issue for decades, and many Islamic countries feel that they have a responsibility to respond. Coming together in Qatar gave them a chance to show unity and speak with one voice.
Unity is a very important word here. Unity means standing together and working as one. For Islamic countries, the summit was not just about expressing political opinions, it was also about showing solidarity. Solidarity means support for each other in times of difficulty. When these countries gathered in Qatar, they wanted to show the world that they share a common concern. Even if their individual policies are different, they wanted to express the idea that the issue of Palestine matters deeply to them.
That is right, Julia. And when countries act together, they form what is called an alliance. An alliance is a group of countries or people that agree to support one another for a shared purpose. For example, if students in a classroom decide to work as a team to complete a project, they form an alliance. In the same way, Islamic countries at the Qatar Summit formed a political and moral alliance. They wanted to show that they stand side by side and that their voices are stronger when combined.
This is also about the idea of a shared vision. A shared vision means that a group of people agree on what they want for the future. At the Qatar Summit, the shared vision was that peace, justice, and humanitarian support should be the focus in dealing with the conflict. Of course, each country has its own national interests, but in the summit, they tried to put these aside to focus on the larger picture. For English learners, this shows us how vocabulary can describe both personal goals and international goals.
Let us also remember that the role of Islamic countries in the summit was not only political, but also symbolic. Symbolic means something that represents an idea larger than itself. By attending, leaders were showing that the issue was not forgotten and that they wanted to keep it on the world's agenda. This is important because international issues can sometimes lose attention when other global events happen. The presence of so many Islamic countries reminded the world that this issue is still very serious.
Another role of these countries was to provide humanitarian support. Humanitarian means focused on the well-being of people, especially during crises. Several countries at the summit discussed ways of providing aid to civilians who are suffering because of the conflict. This is another side of the role they play, not only making political statements, but also offering practical help. For English learners, words like aid, relief, and assistance are useful when talking about humanitarian actions.
We should also talk about diversity among Islamic countries. They are not all the same, and they do not always agree. Some have stronger economies, some have larger populations, and some have closer relationships with Western nations. Yet, despite these differences, the summit allowed them to present themselves as a collective. A collective means a group that acts together. This collective role made their message louder, because when more voices say the same thing, it is harder for the world to ignore.
That is such a key point, Adam. Imagine being in a classroom where only one student complains about something. The teacher might not change much. But if the whole class speaks together, the teacher will have to listen. In the same way, the summit gave Islamic countries a louder voice by allowing them to speak as a group. This is why cooperation, another important word, is so valuable. Cooperation means working together to reach a goal. At the Qatar Summit, cooperation turned individual concerns into a stronger unified message.
Their role also included trying to influence global opinion. Global opinion means the way people and governments around the world view an issue. Islamic countries wanted to show that they support peace and that they want justice for Palestinians. By expressing this together, they hope to influence the discussion in international organizations like the United Nations. For English learners, this is a chance to see how words like influence and opinion can be used both in daily life and in global politics.
Another role was about protecting their own identity and values. For many Islamic countries, the issue of Palestine is not only political, but also cultural and religious. By attending the summit, they showed that they feel connected to this cause. This role is about maintaining their values in front of the world. For English learners, it is important to see how words like identity, values, and principles can describe both personal life and international affairs.
So when we ask, what role did Islamic countries play at the Qatar Summit? We can see many layers. They came to show unity, to form an alliance, to share a vision, to offer humanitarian support, to influence world opinion, and to protect their identity. This is a powerful role, because when nations act together, they can make a stronger impact than when they act alone. This is a lesson not only in politics, but also in life, and in learning English. Cooperation often brings better results.
Yes, Adam. And for our listeners, this section shows how important vocabulary is. Words like unity, solidarity, alliance, cooperation, collective, identity, and humanitarian help us describe complex ideas in clear ways. If you practice these words, you will be able to talk not only about world politics, but also about teamwork in your own life. This is how learning English connects personal experiences with global events.
And the story of Islamic countries at the Qatar Summit also teaches us that even when there are differences, dialogue is still possible. Dialogue means open discussion between two or more people. The role of Islamic countries was not to solve everything in one meeting, but to continue the dialogue and keep the issue alive. This shows patience, persistence, and commitment. These are values that we can also use in our own learning journey.
So the Qatar Summit reminds us that the role of Islamic countries is not just about politics. It is also about showing the world the power of unity, the importance of shared values, and the strength that comes from speaking with one voice. And for you, dear listeners, this is a reminder that learning English is also a collective journey. You are not alone. Many learners across the world are studying with you, and together your voices are stronger. That is the role you play in this community.
Now that we have looked at the role of Islamic countries in the summit, let us move to the heart of the meeting, the key issues that were discussed. When leaders gathered in Qatar, they had many points to consider, but four main themes came up again and again: the call for peace, the urgent need for humanitarian aid, the importance of political unity among nations, and the role of diplomacy in shaping the future. Each of these themes is not only political but also deeply human.
Let us begin with peace. Peace is the first and most important word that leaders wanted to focus on. For decades, the conflict between Israel and Palestine has caused pain and suffering for millions of people. Leaders at the summit repeated the idea that peace is the only solution. For English learners, the word peace is simple, but its meaning is powerful. Peace means living without violence or fear, where people can go to school, work, and home safely. This is what the summit hoped to promote.
Connected to peace was the call for a ceasefire. A ceasefire means an agreement to stop fighting for a period of time. At the Qatar Summit, many leaders said that without a ceasefire, there can be no chance for meaningful dialogue. A ceasefire gives space for negotiations, for humanitarian aid to reach civilians, and for communities to breathe in safety. For our listeners, remember this word because it often appears in news about wars or conflicts. It is a key part of international vocabulary.
The second issue that came up strongly was humanitarian aid. Humanitarian aid refers to help given to people in crisis, such as food, medicine, shelter, and other basic needs. Leaders at the summit wanted to show that beyond politics, there is a human cost to this conflict. Families are displaced, children are affected, and communities are under pressure. The role of Islamic countries was not only to talk about politics, but also to find ways to provide humanitarian relief.
Yes, Julia, And this point about humanitarian aid is important for learners because it shows the softer side of politics. Politics is not only about power, it is also about people. By focusing on humanitarian issues, the leaders showed that they want to protect lives and bring comfort where possible. Words like relief, assistance, support, and aid are connected to this topic. These are useful not only in the context of global issues, but also in daily life when we talk about helping others.
The third issue discussed was political unity. Political unity means that countries agree to stand together and present one message to the world. Leaders at the summit understood that if they act separately, their voices may be weaker. But if they agree on a shared statement, the world will pay more attention. This is why unity was not only a theme, but also a strategy. For English learners, this shows how the word unity can describe not only friendships or teamwork, but also the politics of entire regions.
Another connected idea is the word resolution. In politics, a resolution is a formal decision or statement agreed upon by a group. At the summit, leaders wanted to agree on a resolution that expressed their position. For learners, it is important to notice that resolution also has another meaning: the determination to do something. For example, a student may have a resolution to study English every day. In international politics, however, a resolution is a document that declares a collective position.
The fourth key issue was diplomacy. Diplomacy, as we explained earlier, is the practice of managing international relations through peaceful talks and negotiations. Leaders at the Qatar Summit discussed how diplomacy could be used to push for peace and to influence global opinion. Instead of using force, they wanted to use words, discussions, and agreements. For English learners, diplomacy is a very useful word because it can also describe personal behavior. Being diplomatic means being careful, respectful, and wise in communication.
Let us give a small example for our listeners. Imagine two friends having an argument about where to eat. One friend wants pizza, the other wants rice. Instead of fighting, they sit down and talk. They listen to each other and maybe choose a place that offers both dishes. That process is diplomacy on a small scale. At the summit, countries were doing the same thing but on a much larger scale, with much more serious issues at stake.
Another key issue was stability. Stability means a situation where things are steady, balanced, and not changing in dangerous ways. Leaders wanted to see more stability in the region because instability creates insecurity not only for Israel and Palestine, but also for neighboring countries. For English learners, this word can also describe personal life. For example, if you have a stable job and a stable home, you feel safe and balanced. In politics, stability means less risk of violence and more chances for progress.
Security was also a major word in the discussions. Security means protection from danger. Leaders at the summit said that both Israelis and Palestinians deserve security. Without security, peace cannot last. This shows us that the summit was not about one side winning, but about finding a balance where all people in the region can feel safe. For learners, remember that security can also mean job security, financial security, or even emotional security. It is a very flexible word.
The summit also discussed the role of international organizations. Countries talked about how groups like the United Nations can support peace efforts. They wanted to send a message that the conflict cannot be solved by one or two countries alone. It requires the support of the global community. This shows how international politics often involves many actors, not just the ones directly in conflict. For learners, this is a good example of how cooperation is essential in problem-solving.
To summarize the key issues, peace was the goal, a ceasefire was the first step, humanitarian aid was the urgent need, political unity was the strategy, diplomacy was the tool, stability and security were the hopes, and international support was the framework. These issues show that the summit was not only about statements, but about practical concerns. And for you, dear listeners, They show how English words can capture complex realities in simple, clear ways.
Yes, Adam. And what makes this section powerful is that it connects human needs with political actions. Sometimes politics seems far away from daily life, but when we talk about peace, security, and humanitarian aid, we realize it is about real people's lives. By learning these words and ideas, you are not only improving your English, but also becoming more aware of the world around you. This is the true value of educational podcasts like the English Globe.
Now, dear listeners, let us focus on the messages that emerged from the Qatar Summit regarding Israel and Palestine. The summit was not simply a gathering for discussion, it was an opportunity for Islamic countries to communicate a collective stance. This collective stance means that the countries wanted to speak with one voice to express their concerns, their hopes, and their vision for the future. For English learners, notice the word collective, which means done together or shared by a group.
That is a key word, Adam. A collective message is stronger than individual opinions. Islamic countries wanted to emphasize justice, peace, and respect for human rights. Justice means fairness and the protection of rights. Leaders expressed that every person affected by the conflict deserves fair treatment, safety, and access to basic needs. This shows that their messages were not just political statements, but also moral statements, reflecting values that resonate beyond politics.
Exactly, Julia. Another important idea in the summit was the encouragement of dialogue. Dialogue means open and respectful conversation between two or more parties. The countries attending Qatar's summit called for dialogue between Israel and Palestine as a path toward understanding and potential agreement. For English learners, this is a simple but powerful word. Dialogue is a tool that can be used in everyday life, at school, at work, or in personal relationships.
And this connects to negotiation, another key term. Negotiation is the process of discussing differences to reach a mutually acceptable solution. The summit encouraged negotiation as a way to resolve conflict without further violence. For learners, it is helpful to practice this word in daily life. For example, you negotiate with your friend about what movie to watch, or with a colleague about how to share tasks. At the international level, negotiation involves countries and leaders with serious stakes.
Humanitarian concerns were also central in the messages. Leaders highlighted the suffering of civilians and the need to provide aid, such as food, water, shelter, and medical support. This is an important aspect because it reminds us that politics and human life are interconnected. For English learners, words like humanitarian, aid, support, relief are essential. They help you talk about helping others in both global and local contexts.
Another message was about the importance of stability and security in the region. Stability refers to a situation that is balanced and steady, where people can live without fear. Security means protection from danger. Leaders expressed that any progress toward peace must also ensure that civilians feel safe and that the risk of violence is minimized. For learners, understanding these words can help you discuss both local and global situations clearly.
The summit also emphasized the need for long-term solutions. Short-term solutions like temporary ceasefires are important, but not enough. Long-term solutions involve dialogue, compromise, and continued cooperation. Islamic countries highlighted that only through sustained effort, negotiation, and mutual understanding can real progress be achieved. This is a lesson not only for international politics, but also for learners practicing patience and perseverance in their English studies.
That is so true, Adam. Another point made in the summit was the importance of cooperation with international organizations. Organizations such as the United Nations can provide support, facilitate negotiations, and monitor humanitarian efforts. Islamic countries encouraged collaboration with these organizations to ensure that their messages reach a wider audience and have a tangible impact. For English learners, this is an example of how vocabulary like collaboration, monitor, and facilitate is applied in real-world contexts.
In addition, leaders stressed fairness in addressing the needs of affected populations. Fairness means that everyone should be treated with respect and given opportunities according to their needs. This principle of fairness guided many of the discussions and recommendations. For learners, the word fairness is versatile. It can describe personal relationships, classroom activities, and international affairs alike. Understanding its use in different contexts strengthens your English comprehension.
The summit also sent a message about hope. Even though the conflict is long-standing and complicated, leaders emphasize that there is hope for peace if dialogue, justice, and humanitarian aid continue. Hope is a word that resonates with everyone. It encourages perseverance, patience, and action. For learners, it is a word that can describe feelings, motivation, and goals, both personally and in global affairs.
Another key message was about responsibility. Countries express that they have a moral responsibility to speak out, provide aid, and promote dialogue. Responsibility means being accountable for actions and their consequences. Leaders emphasized that remaining silent or inactive does not solve problems. Instead, taking responsible actions can contribute to meaningful change. For English learners, this is a word you can use to describe duties at school, work, and personal life.
Finally, the summit communicated a vision of unity and collective strength. By acting together, Islamic countries showed that their voices are stronger when shared. They highlighted that unity, cooperation, and dialogue are essential in addressing one of the most complex conflicts in the world. For learners, these words, unity, cooperation, and dialogue, are not just political terms. They are words you can use to describe teamwork and collaboration in your daily life.
In summary, the messages on Israel and Palestine were multi-layered. They emphasized justice, dialogue, negotiation, humanitarian aid, stability, security, fairness, responsibility, hope, and unity. These words are essential vocabulary for English learners. They also help us understand how leaders express complex ideas in clear, concise language. By listening carefully, you can learn not only about international politics, but also how to communicate your own ideas effectively.
And for you, dear listeners, these messages are also lessons in critical thinking. Understanding the words and ideas discussed at the summit allows you to form your own opinions, discuss global issues confidently, and express yourself in English. By learning these words, you are connecting language learning with real-world knowledge, making your English not only correct, but meaningful and relevant.
Now that we have discussed the messages on Israel and Palestine, it is important to examine how the world reacted to the Qatar Summit. When leaders from multiple Islamic countries come together to discuss such a sensitive topic, the international community pays attention. Countries outside the summit, international organizations, and the media all responded. Understanding these reactions is crucial, not only for following world news, but also for learning English vocabulary that describes global perspectives.
Exactly, Adam. Global reactions were varied, but mostly focused on the importance of dialogue and peaceful discussions. Many countries praised Qatar for hosting a summit that encouraged conversation rather than conflict. Praise means expressing approval or admiration. For learners, this word can describe anything positive you notice, whether it is in politics, school, or everyday life. Here, it is used to describe international acknowledgement of Qatar's efforts.
One of the main groups reacting to the summit was the United Nations. The UN often emphasizes peaceful negotiation and humanitarian support. Officials highlighted that meetings like the Qatar Summit are essential to promote cooperation and reduce tension. Cooperation is working together toward a shared goal, and in this case, the shared goal is peace in the region. For English learners, this is an example of how abstract political terms are applied to real-world situations.
Western nations also reacted with interest. Some countries expressed cautious optimism. Cautious optimism means hoping for a positive outcome while being careful not to overestimate success. They appreciated that Islamic countries were presenting a unified message, which could help in creating a framework for dialogue. Words like cautious and optimism are valuable for learners because they describe attitudes that are realistic yet hopeful.
International media covered the summit extensively. Media coverage is important because it influences global understanding. Journalists highlighted Qatar's role as a mediator and explained the main issues discussed. Coverage also included reactions from analysts who emphasized the challenges ahead. For learners, the words coverage, analyst, and highlight are useful in many contexts, from news reports to classroom presentations.
Some neighboring countries expressed support for the summit's objectives, especially regarding humanitarian concerns. Providing aid and relief to affected civilians is widely regarded as a priority. Words like humanitarian and relief are repeated frequently in international news, and understanding them helps learners follow conversations about global crises. In addition, leaders stressed that collaboration among countries is necessary to achieve meaningful outcomes.
On the other hand, some countries reacted more cautiously, highlighting challenges in implementing the summit's recommendations. Implementation means putting plans or decisions into action. For example, a country may agree to provide aid, but needs time to organize resources. This shows that global reactions are not always simple. Understanding the nuances of reactions helps learners see the complexity of international diplomacy.
Analysts also noted that the summit sends a symbolic message to the world. Symbolic means representing an idea rather than being the action itself. By meeting together, Islamic countries demonstrated solidarity, which can influence public opinion, media narratives, and political discussions globally. For learners, symbolic is a versatile word. You can use it in everyday life, such as describing a gesture that represents friendship or respect.
Global reactions also included social and academic commentary. Universities, think tanks, and experts in international relations analyzed the summit's potential impact. They discussed whether it could lead to long-term dialogue, future summits, or coordinated humanitarian initiatives. Academic commentary helps learners see how vocabulary and critical thinking combine. Words like analysis, potential, and initiative are often used in professional and educational contexts.
Another important aspect of global reactions was the emphasis on diplomacy. Diplomacy, as we have mentioned before, is managing relationships peacefully through discussion and negotiation. Many countries noted that diplomatic efforts, even when small, are better than ignoring conflicts. For English learners, this shows how words can be repeated in context to strengthen understanding. Diplomacy is both a concept and a practice, and it is central to international reactions.
Economic analysts also commented on the summit's implications. They noted that political stability in the Middle East affects trade, investment, and regional cooperation. Stability, as we explained, means a situation that is steady and secure. Economic reactions demonstrate that politics, humanitarian efforts, and trade are interconnected. For learners, words like economic, stability, and implication are important because they appear in multiple contexts, from news to academic articles.
Another reaction came from civil society organizations. These are groups of citizens and NGOs who advocate for humanitarian assistance and peace. They welcomed the summit as a chance to encourage governments to address human suffering. Words like advocate, humanitarian, and encourage are useful vocabulary for learners. They show how individuals and organizations can participate in global discussions.
Overall, the global reactions highlighted both support and caution. While many praised Qatar's initiative and the unity of Islamic countries, others emphasized the difficulty of turning discussions into tangible change. Tangible means something real and concrete. This word is useful for learners because it describes actions, results, or evidence that can be clearly observed. For example, providing aid is a tangible action, while promises alone are not.
For English learners, observing these reactions is an opportunity to see complex ideas expressed in clear language. Words like solidarity, implementation, diplomacy, symbolic, stability, and tangible are repeated in news, reports, and academic discussions. By listening carefully, you can learn not only the meaning of these words, but also how to use them in your own writing and speaking.
To summarize, global reactions to the Qatar Summit ranged from praise and cautious optimism to critical analysis and calls for implementation. The summit received attention from the United Nations, Western nations, media, analysts, academic institutions, and civil society organizations. Each reaction reflects a different perspective, but all emphasize that dialogue, humanitarian aid, and cooperation are essential.
This section teaches us two lessons. First, understanding global reactions requires careful listening and reading. Second, language plays a central role in expressing opinions, analyzing events, and influencing others. For learners, this is a practical example of how English can be used to describe, analyze, and communicate about world affairs. By paying attention to vocabulary and context, you can follow news and express your own ideas confidently.
And finally, dear listeners, global reactions remind us that no country or organization acts alone. Every action, statement, or summit influences others in complex ways. By learning the vocabulary and understanding the context, you strengthen both your knowledge of international relations and your English skills. This makes you a more informed listener, thinker, and communicator.
Exactly, Adam. The Qatar Summit may seem like a distant event, but the reactions show that international cooperation, dialogue, and humanitarian concerns are relevant to everyone. By learning these words and ideas, you not only improve your English but also gain insight into how the world works. For learners, this is the perfect combination of language practice and global awareness.
Now we turn our attention to one of the most significant aspects of the Qatar Summit, the role of unity among Islamic countries. Unity means coming together as one group, working toward common goals, and supporting each other. In the context of the summit, unity was a central theme because countries understood that their influence on international issues grows when they act collectively. For English learners, this word is essential, as it can describe teamwork, friendship, and global politics.
That is correct, Adam. Unity is more than just being in the same place or agreeing on a single issue. It represents a shared commitment to values, goals, and responsibilities. Islamic countries attending the Qatar Summit demonstrated unity by coordinating their messages, expressing solidarity with affected communities, and presenting a consistent voice on issues like Israel and Palestine. Solidarity is another word to learn. It means mutual support and shared responsibility.
When countries show solidarity, they send a powerful signal to the world. It tells others that their concerns are serious and that they are willing to work together rather than act individually. In international relations, acting together often increases credibility. Strength, in this context, does not always refer to military power. It refers to the power of influence, the ability to negotiate effectively, and the capacity to advocate for shared goals. For learners, strength can describe physical, emotional, or political power.
Cooperation is the next word we should focus on. Cooperation means working together for mutual benefit. At the Qatar Summit, Islamic countries practice cooperation by agreeing on statements, coordinating humanitarian efforts, and engaging in discussions about shared responsibilities. This cooperation is what makes unity meaningful. Without cooperation, unity becomes just a word. With cooperation, unity becomes a practical force that can shape regional and even global outcomes.
Another reason unity is important is that it amplifies the global voice of Islamic countries. When one country speaks alone, its message may be overlooked. But when multiple countries present a shared perspective, their message is harder to ignore. This is especially important in conflicts that attract global attention, such as the Israel-Palestine situation. Unity allows countries to collectively express concerns, suggest solutions, and advocate for peace and humanitarian assistance.
Unity also allows countries to coordinate strategies effectively. For example, by presenting a joint approach to humanitarian aid, Islamic countries ensure that resources reach people more efficiently. Coordination requires planning, communication, and trust. Trust is essential because without it, cooperation cannot succeed. This is why the summit's focus on dialogue and shared planning is so important. For learners, words like coordination and trust can be applied to both personal life and international relations.
Solidarity and cooperation also build credibility in the eyes of the global community. When countries act together, they are seen as serious, organized, and responsible. Credibility is a word that learners should note. It means being believable, reliable, or trustworthy. By demonstrating unity, Islamic countries at the Qatar Summit increased their credibility and strengthened their role in global discussions.
Another important aspect is that unity helps manage conflicts within the Islamic world itself. Countries sometimes have differences in policies, priorities, or alliances. However, by focusing on shared values and collective goals, unity allows them to rise above these differences. This teaches an important lesson for English learners. Even when individuals or groups have disagreements, focusing on common objectives and cooperating can create strength.
Unity also strengthens the moral voice of Islamic countries. Moral voice means the ability to speak about what is right and fair. By coming together, countries can highlight human rights, justice, and humanitarian needs more effectively than when speaking alone. For learners, this reinforces the idea that English is not only a tool for communication, but also a tool for expressing values and advocating for important causes.
Let us also consider practical examples. During the summit, Islamic countries agreed on statements supporting ceasefire measures, coordinated humanitarian aid, and emphasized the importance of dialogue between Israel and Palestine. These actions show that unity is not just symbolic, it has real effects. It allows countries to plan, act, and influence events in ways they could not achieve alone.
Cooperation within unity also encourages long-term collaboration. One summit is not enough to solve complex issues, but building relationships and trust between countries creates a foundation for future efforts. These relationships allow for coordinated responses in crises, joint initiatives in diplomacy, and shared efforts in humanitarian programs. For learners, this teaches a broader lesson. Lasting results often come from sustained teamwork.
Another dimension is that unity provides reassurance to citizens and affected communities. When people see that their leaders are working together, they feel hope, confidence, and a sense of protection. Words like reassurance, confidence, and hope are very useful for learners because they are widely used in both personal and professional contexts. They describe emotions, strategies, and responses to challenges.
Unity also plays a role in influencing global policy. A unified stance from Islamic countries can shape discussions in international organizations, encourage other nations to pay attention, and contribute to solutions. Policy influence is strengthened when countries present a consistent and cooperative approach. For English learners, policy is a useful word to describe rules, guidelines, or strategies in both government and organizational settings.
In summary, unity among Islamic countries is crucial for several reasons. It amplifies their voice, increases credibility, strengthens cooperation, builds moral authority, encourages long-term collaboration, and reassures affected communities. For English learners, the vocabulary we discussed, unity, solidarity, strength, cooperation, credibility, coordination, and moral voice, illustrates how a single concept can be applied in multiple contexts, from daily life to international diplomacy.
Dear listeners, understanding unity in the Islamic world is not just about politics. It teaches us about teamwork, shared goals, and the power of working together. Just as Islamic countries amplify their influence through unity, you too can achieve more by cooperating with others, whether in school, at work, or in social settings. Learning these words helps you describe and participate in both global events and personal experiences.
Exactly, Adam. And for you, our listeners, this section shows that English is a tool for understanding the world. By learning the vocabulary around unity, solidarity, strength, and cooperation, you can discuss international events confidently, express your opinions, and even apply these lessons to your own life. Unity is a concept that works on a global scale and in your personal journey of learning English.
Dear listeners, we have now reached the final part of our discussion on the Qatar Summit. Reflecting on everything we have covered is essential, both for understanding global events and for improving your English skills. The summit demonstrated the importance of dialogue, unity, cooperation, and compromise among Islamic countries. By examining this event, we can learn not only about politics, but also about communication, vocabulary, and critical thinking.
That is correct, Adam. One key takeaway is that international summits like this one are complex, but understanding them becomes easier when we focus on clear ideas and vocabulary. Words like unity, solidarity, cooperation, compromise, disagreement, perspective, humanitarian aid, and diplomacy are central. For English learners, knowing these words helps you discuss global topics with confidence and accuracy, making your language more professional and meaningful.
Another important lesson is that international relations are shaped by multiple perspectives. Islamic countries, while united in some areas, also face challenges and disagreements. This shows that global events involve negotiation, patience, and compromise. For learners, this is a reminder that understanding language is not just about vocabulary, but also about context. Perspective and disagreement are words you can use to express differences in opinions clearly and politely.
Cooperation and dialogue were recurring themes throughout the summit. Islamic countries showed that working together strengthens their global voice and ability to influence important decisions. For English learners, cooperation, dialogue, and compromise are not only political terms, they are practical words you can use in school, work, or personal projects. Learning them in context makes your English more versatile and powerful.
Reflecting on challenges is also essential. Differences in priorities, approaches, and timing showed that disagreements are natural. However, the ability to compromise, coordinate, and negotiate allowed countries to present a collective message. For learners, this teaches that English can be used to discuss complex ideas clearly, helping you describe problems and solutions effectively in real-life situations.
Another takeaway is the role of humanitarian and moral concerns in global decision-making. Leaders emphasized justice, support, and protection for civilians affected by conflicts. For English learners, vocabulary like humanitarian, relief, aid, justice, and stability not only expands your language skills, but also teaches you to discuss meaningful topics with clarity and empathy. These words are useful in news, reports, essays, and conversations.
Observing global reactions also offers valuable lessons. International organizations, media, and neighboring countries responded with praise, cautious optimism, or analysis. Learning words like reaction, analysis, implication, credibility, and symbolic helps learners describe events and opinions accurately. These words are highly applicable in academic, professional, and personal contexts, allowing you to communicate thoughtfully about world affairs.
Unity, solidarity, and cooperation were shown to be effective strategies for influence. Even though not all countries agreed on every detail, the summit demonstrated that collective action increases credibility and impact. For learners, these words are versatile. They can describe teamwork, friendship, and collaborative projects in your daily life, making English learning practical and relevant.
Another lesson is about critical thinking. By following the summit closely, we can analyze strategies, evaluate outcomes, and understand the reasons behind decisions. Words like evaluation, outcome, strategy, and implication are key for learners. Understanding these words allows you to discuss ideas clearly, express opinions, and write coherent essays, reports, or summaries.
Listening to professional dialogue, like the conversations between leaders at the summit, also teaches us about structured communication. Clear introduction of ideas, supporting examples, and summarizing conclusions make discussions effective. For English learners, practicing these techniques improves both writing and speaking skills. Phrases like "another important aspect," "in conclusion," and, for example, are useful connectors in professional English.
Another important point is context. Words are easier to understand and remember when tied to meaningful events. For example, understanding compromise in international relations helps learners apply the same concept to group work, personal disagreements, or negotiations. Similarly, learning humanitarian vocabulary through global events makes these words relevant, memorable, and practical.
Finally, dear listeners, the Qatar Summit reminds us that English learning is a journey, much like international diplomacy. Patience, practice, and reflection are key. By connecting vocabulary and ideas from real events to your own life, you strengthen comprehension, speaking, and writing skills. Understanding unity, cooperation, compromise, disagreement, perspective, and humanitarian concerns allows learners to discuss complex topics confidently and clearly.
In conclusion, the Qatar Summit provides multiple lessons for English learners. Vocabulary, context, critical thinking, structured communication, and global awareness are all interconnected. By paying attention to words, ideas, and strategies, you can improve your English while gaining insight into international relations. Language and knowledge go hand in hand, making learning both practical and engaging.
Dear listeners, we encourage you to reflect on these lessons, practice using the words and phrases we highlighted, discuss global events with friends, write your thoughts, and analyze news stories in English. This active engagement will strengthen your skills, improve confidence, and allow you to express opinions thoughtfully. Learning English through real-world events like the Qatar Summit is both effective and inspiring.
Before we end, remember that learning English is not only about speaking correctly, but also about understanding ideas, context, and perspectives. By studying global events, expanding vocabulary, and practicing structured communication, you can become a confident speaker, listener, and thinker. The Qatar Summit is just one example of how English learning and global awareness go hand in hand.
Thank you, dear listeners, for joining us on this journey through the Qatar Summit. We hope you found it informative, educational, and useful for your English learning. Keep practicing, keep listening, and remember that every new word and idea brings you closer to fluency. Please leave a comment sharing your thoughts on the summit and your experience learning English. We would love to hear from you.
And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the English Globe to continue learning with us. Your engagement helps us create more educational content and provides an opportunity for you to practice English in real-world contexts. Together, we can explore global topics, expand vocabulary, and improve language skills step by step.
Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Keep learning, stay curious, and remember that English is a tool to understand the world and share your ideas confidently. By combining language practice with knowledge of global events, you are preparing for success in both English and your broader understanding of the world.